Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Whether you're in need of a website, domain or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. Hello, we're back with another weekly vlog. It's been some time, I've been up to some things, and here they are. So the first thing which I shall talk about was some portraits which I took of my friend Josiah. So playing with studio lighting is something which I haven't done in forever, many years, maybe 6 years. Since then, I've pretty much either been a pure hard flash, the kind of look you just have built into a point and shoot, or natural light. So I thought it was probably time to step my game up and explore, expand, and conquer external lighting. So I actually purchased an umbrella and a cover for it to turn into a softbox for my portable flash unit. I thought this was the perfect opportunity to go out and test it. So I went and took some lovely mullet update pictures from Josiah, who I shot many times in the past. I was using a Mamiya 7 with an 80mm lens, and then of course this flash with a much larger than expected umbrella. So my whole kind of concept was to get this equilibrium of light. I wanted to shoot at dusk. So past golden hour where there'd be nice natural light on the subject. I wanted it to be just some nice kind of colour in the sky, but then use the flash to fill in the subject. And that would kind of bring this kind of neutral, flat exposure, but a kind of interesting visual that you couldn't achieve without this kind of lighting. And you could do this with a regular hard flash, but I think that kind of softness from having the umbrella on the cover, it does just give that kind of weird look to it. It's so soft, but unnatural at the same time. And I think they actually came out great, and it's something which I want to keep exploring. There's so many different things which I can do with this. It's a tricky thing to play around with, especially if you're going to shoot it on film, because you're not necessarily sure of how the results are going to be until you get your roll back. So it's a bit of a trial and error process, but it's great fun. So I was recently in New York, which is something that I briefly passed on in the last episode. Whilst I was there, I managed to go to quite a few exhibitions which were really worth mentioning. So the first one was my friend Devins Exhibition, and he was kind of the whole reason why I was in New York. He was moving out of town, and I wanted to see him to have a final celebration before he left. So his exhibition was the photography that he had made over the last 7 years living in New York, and it was a mixture of abstract, still lifes, and fashion. All of it was shot on instant film, on a variety of different mediums. It's just really amazing. He's such a great photographer. He also has such a community of other photographers that he's built up in New York. It was just really cool to hang around and see all of that. And also, worth mentioning, whilst with him, we had this beer called Super 8, which was brewed with 8 different superfoods, which is why it was called that. But then they actually realized that you could develop film in it. So it became a collaboration with Kodak, and it came with a recipe to develop a roll of Super 8 film. It's the most flannel shirt hipster beer ever, but it is undeniably quite cool. The second amazing exhibition which I went to see was the Whitney biannual. It's a huge exhibition showing 75 different artists from every spectrum of art who are all making important contemporary work in America. It's pretty overwhelming how much there is there. The things which really stood out to me were some of the photos, so I'm just going to highlight 2 of the things. The first one was El Perez, and this was the first work which really stopped me in my tracks. They're really large prints which were just amazing. They're these really huge, intimate portraits of people who are transforming their bodies. And I don't really feel educated enough to talk on the work too much. I just really love the photos. However, I did find a mini documentary about their work, which you can watch on YouTube, and I'll link, which is really great. Definitely worth checking out. And it's also definitely worth checking out their website and their work because, I don't know, these images were just very powerful. The second, which I really enjoyed, was Hatteberg. I hope that's pronounced correctly. And these were more of a documentary style of photos taken in rural America. If you ever see a portrait of a man whose face is covered in bees, that's going to be impactful. I don't know, it's just these scenes and the locations were just so bizarre and unusual, especially to someone that doesn't live in those kind of places. It was just really eye-opening. Also just composition based, they were great, and the lighting was also used really well. It's also worth checking out their website to see some more. It was really enjoyable. And the final exhibition that I saw was at Yossi Milo and was Megan Ripenhoff. And now these were very large cyanotypes, which I guess maybe it's not photography anymore, but it's kind of is, and is definitely worth mentioning. This is by far the best exhibition I've seen in a long time. It's had a lasting impact on me. Whether that's the actual prints were just really great. They were amazing kind of abstracts which are created to look like water, but they're also made using water. They go out to the sea and they make these unique pieces of art through exposing with actual like lakes and rivers and things like that. The way that they're presented is also really interesting. The kind of mounting and the finishing of the frames is really amazing. Like, there was this diptych which was staggered in the way it was presented and had a wave, and they mounted it so that the wave was more 3D than the rest, and it was just really great. It was quite a contemporary layout, and even like one frame was turned on its side a bit. Yeah, it was just really, really great. If you ever get the chance to see their work, it's definitely worth it, because they are all unique, and you don't really get that experience unless you're there with it. And speaking of diptychs, since then I've found myself just thinking about them and making some of my own, which actually leads me on to the next thing which I did, which was taking a diptych of a rose. So I had this idea of taking a nice still life of a rose when it was purchased, and then also when it had wilted. Because I thought it could be a nice addition to the series of photos I'm making, which are all about national pride and heritage and patriotism. And I just thought it could be a nice metaphor for some of those themes. I ended up taking, I think it was a whole day for it to get to the right level of sag. I'm reasonably happy with how it came out. One of the problems obviously was that the second image was a bit underexposed. And also I didn't realise until after I'd taken the first one that the kind of shadow from the wall would have made the background not perfect. That wasn't something I realised at first. So I think next time I would just do it in a different position. Also maybe use like a sheet or a piece of fabric for the backdrop instead of just the white wall, so it just had a bit more texture in it. But all in all, it was fun. Like, it's an experiment, and I think getting out of your comfort zone is something that everyone should try and do. So I'm not sure I've ever really talked about magazines. I normally keep it to books. So I thought I'd talk about my favourite one. And now this is definitely inspired by Devin, who I talked about earlier. Every time I go and see him, he forces me to read some Apartamento, which has become the only magazine I really read. Actually, when I was with him last, he was going through all his books and deciding which ones he could take with him and which ones to give away. And I ended up reading the 10-year book of Apartamento, and it's just amazing. So it's these interviews with artists about their lives and their houses. So it's these really nice interior architecture photos and portraits, all shot in a really similar style. A lot of it looks like 35mm with a front flash, but there of course is like a bit of variance in that. But just like as far as the art direction of the magazine goes, it's just really nice to look at. And then also the interviews, you can really learn a lot from it. And I think there's a lot to be said from ingesting wisdom from other artists that aren't photographers. So yeah, I definitely recommend picking this up. And the second thing, which I've been reading, is a book, and that's The Pillar by Stephen Gill. So I'd heard a lot of buzz about this book online. It was getting amazing reviews, so I decided I should try and pick it up. And now, it's not necessarily your typical photography book. It's actually loads of images captured with a kind of motion sensor camera, where he's composed a scene of a pillar in a field, and it's just taking photos whenever something trips it. The book is 242 pages long, and it's a real kind of like mammoth slog of repetition where you just kind of see the wildlife interact with this pillar. Most of it's birds, and apparently it actually captured 170 of the different species of birds in the area, which is nearly all of them. It just is amazing. I think it's something that only works in book form. I don't think seeing this online on a website or in an exhibition would do it justice, because there's something about flicking that page and not quite knowing what's going to be next that really does something great. There's some amazing photos in it, some really cool expressions, lighting, different scenery, and also cool flocks and stuff like that. I don't know, it's different, and it reminds me of a book called TTP, which came out through Mac a year ago as their first book award, which was a similar idea, but photos of a table tennis table in a park. and both are really cool, similar ideas, just executed really, really well. Definitely check that out. So the final thing to talk about is photo conversation, and I've ended up switching it up. We're going for a portrait this time, and it's by Drew Ducote. The first reason why I picked this was because it was a portrait and it would shift things up, open a new avenue. Second reason was his skin does kind of resemble the tones of the power plant. It's not necessarily a really natural looking skin tone, but I think it does actually give out a really nice atmosphere, and paired with the power plant, I think looks pretty cool. So I've seen a lot of people tag the hashtag with images which I don't actually think pair that well. So please do remember, don't just hashtag it to get your photo seen. Try and hashtag with a purpose. So if you think you've taken a photo which pairs nicely with this in a sequence, upload it to Instagram, hashtag it with NF Conversation, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person. So finally, I'd like to thank Squarespace again for sponsoring this video and their ongoing support of the channel. So if you're looking to build a website, purchase a domain, start a blog or a shop, you can do all of this with Squarespace. Now, you don't need any prior experience of building websites to use it. It's super easy and intuitive, and you can get amazing professional looking results. And what's best is you can get 10% off your order if you use the code negative feedback. So thank you very much for watching. I think in the next 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure there's a In Conversation and film review. I think. You'll see.